Harmonious. That's the standout characteristic of Ask's color and lighting style. She masterfully mixes all the colors she uses without relying on blending modes like multiply, overlay, or color dodge. It may sound complicated, but it's actually quite simple. After countless hours of studying Ask's techniques, our resident artist Don't Flip My Canvas has uncovered her secrets. Ask likely has one of the simplest color and lighting styles among great artists. The key? Ambient light. She always uses natural ambient light. I'm sure many of you already know what ambient light is, but I'll just give a quick explanation for those who don't. This is the typical coloring style in anime. We have the base color, shadows, cast shadows, and core shadows, and that's it. With Ask, she uses ambient light to harmonize everything. She first determines the color of the light source, which depends on the time of the scene. In this case, it's a late afternoon scene, so the base color will be mixed with red-orange. Since the light will keep bouncing around the room, it will also hit the areas opposite the light source, coloring the shadows and cast shadows with red-orange. These areas illuminated by red-orange, whether from direct light or bounce light, are called ambient light. In contrast, the darker areas occluded from or out of reach of the ambient light are referred to as ambient occlusion. Ask uses ambient occlusion to paint the shadows of the hair. If you look at this illustration, the shadows may appear muddy, because when the ambient occlusion is placed next to the part of the hair with ambient light, the combination can look muddy. Although this isn't realistically accurate, Ask uses this technique to make her characters look canonical, which we will discuss more later. She uses a different coloring style for the hair compared to the skin and clothing. Our artist will now demonstrate this. Let's start with the hair.
So first, we're going to decide on the color of our light source. Since Ask only uses natural light, the colors we'll choose from are yellow, gold, orange, and red-orange. I'm going to choose gold for the light source. Then we decide on the base color of the character's hair. After that, we'll mix the hair's base color with the color of the light source. We will use this new color to paint the illuminated areas of the hair. Remember, when mixing, don't mix too intensely. Ensure that the new color is analogous to the hair's base color. And as you can see, the new base color is analogous to the hair's original base color. Next, we go back to the original base color, shift downward for a darker value, and slightly desaturate it. This will be used as the shadow. Remember, this color is not mixed with the light source, which is gold. Therefore, when placed next to the hair with ambient light, it will appear muddy. As you can see, the color combination gives the impression that the hair is being illuminated by a gold light source without the need for blending modes such as glow dodge. Now that we know which parts of the hair are in shadow, we're going to change the color of our line art. Ask likes to use red-orange line art. For the parts of the hair that are in shadow, we'll choose a dark red-orange. And for the hair in the light, we'll use a lighter red-orange. This will create an illumination effect in the line art. Next, we're going to add a transition effect or a terminator line. We'll pick any color as long as it is analogous to the base color of the hair. Then choose a very saturated version of that color. Use a soft brush to paint the transition, and there you go. Let's do a value check. The grayscale value looks good, so we can proceed.
Next, let's talk about Ask's distinct hair highlights. They can vary quite a bit. Sometimes she uses white. Other times she uses the color of the light source. And occasionally, the highlights are influenced by multiple ambient lights in the room. As you can see, there is a red highlight reflected from the red ball and green highlight coming from the green ball. In some cases, it's a combination of two ambient lights. For instance, in one illustration, there are two ambient lights hitting the hair directly, blue from the sky and orange from the sun. When blue and orange mix together, they create green highlights. For our illustration, we'll stick to using the color of the light source for the highlights. Ask sometimes adds chromatic aberration to the highlights, which is optional but gives a unique look. She also places highlights in overcast areas, which isn't realistically accurate, but creates a cool contrast. To make the highlights pop, Ask uses 3 types of contrast. Saturation contrast. The highlight appears closer to white than the hair base and shadows. Value contrast. The highlight is lighter than the surrounding colors. Edge contrast. The texture or line art of the hair is very soft, while the edge of the highlight is relatively harder. These 3 contrasts work together to make the hair highlight stand out and capture attention.
To paint the ambient light in the hair shadow, we'll return to the light source and tone it down. Then we'll use this color as a bounce light in the hair shadows. The reason for toning it down is that, as you probably already know, bounce lights are weaker than the direct light due to the inverse square law.
We're done with the hair. To summarize Ask's hair coloring process. 1. The base color is mixed with the color of natural light. 2. The shadows are muddy because they aren't mixed with the light source to keep the hair color canonical. For example, this is Sakura Mato from the Fate series. She has purple hair, but in this illustration, most of her hair appears magenta. This happens because when purple is mixed with gold, the resulting color is magenta. However, our eyes can still recognize that the original hair base color is purple, because Ask retained the darker purple shadows, which, in theory, represent the ambient occlusion. 3. All the colors used should be analogous. 4. The highlights use 3 types of contrast to really stand out. 5. Some parts of the hair shadow have ambient light from the bounce light. And lastly, a common characteristic in Ask's coloring is that the light is always warmer than the shadows, whether in the hair, clothing, or skin, which makes sense because all natural light coming from the sun is warm. The way Ask paints the skin is a bit different from the hair. Unlike the hair, there's no pressure to keep the skin color canonical, so Ask has a bit more freedom in her choices. The way she paints the skin and the dress is essentially the same as other anime styles, but with the added element of ambient light coming from the sun.
Let's paint the skin. First, we'll pick a skin color that reflects the ambient light. This time, our approach will be a bit different. Let's go to our gold light source and select a color from this area. This will be the color of the skin under the golden ambient light, and we'll use it as our base color. Since we're choosing a skin color on the same hue as our light source, there's no need to mix it with gold. By default, the skin color already has the golden ambient light. Let's pick a color for our skin shadow and the second shadow. First, we go back to our skin base color and shift the hue towards a cooler hue. Then we select a darker and more saturated color for the skin shadow. That means we move down and move right. Then from the skin shadow color, we shift the hue further towards a cooler tone. And again, choose a darker and more saturated color for the second shadow. As you can see, the combination of the skin base color and the first shadow gives the impression that the skin is illuminated by a gold light source. And just like with the hair, we're going to paint a gold bounce light on the skin shadow. Again, we'll use the toned down light source that we used for the hair earlier.
The way Ask paints clothing is very similar to how she paints skin. The base color is mixed with the light source, which in this case is gold, and the shadows are cooler and more saturated. The key difference is that with clothing, Ask has more freedom to incorporate a lot of ambient light bouncing off artificial sources from the surrounding objects. Let's go back to this illustration. Here you can see a toned-down red bounce light coming from the red ball, and a toned-down green bounce light from the green ball.
Let's go back to our light source. Since I'm painting a white dress, instead of using pure white, I'm going to pick a color from this area. By default, this white is mixed with the gold ambient light. Next, we'll follow the same pattern as we did with the skin. Starting from the base color, we'll shift the hue towards a cooler tone. Then select a darker and more saturated color for the shadows. Then repeat the process. Then I use a custom brush to add glitters to the dress. After that, we'll return to our toned down light source to paint the ambient light on the dress. I'm not really going in depth with the background and details since I didn't draw them, I only used custom brushes. One more detail from Ask is that she likes to add a subtle aura or shroud behind the hair. I'm going to use the color of the light source for this effect.
And this is what separates the dress from the skin. There's an artificial bounce light coming from the objects around it. In this case, it's a toned-down purple bounce light coming from the earring. And this is how Ask utilizes the light source to harmonize everything, making the light source the mother color that ties the entire piece together. It's not of the same quality, mainly due to the vast difference in skill level between Ask and our artist. We apologize for that. If you have an artist you'd like me to study next, let me know in the comments. I do read them all. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.